too fond of, and it's being negotiated without really paying attention to the ability of the European Union to accept this state as a member. We are not even clear about the particular problems with these groups of migrants, whether it is their social or their cultural background, their education level, or their religious creed. We know that all of them have a Muslim background that connects them, and that there are comparable difficulties with, and that there are no comparable difficulties with immigrants from Iran. This is no real proof. They are, in the majority, political refugees with only few links to a religious background. An accession of Turkey to the European Union would be a human experiment on a major scale, the effects of which cannot be foreseen, but that could not be corrected in the future. It would be a decision that is governed by economic interests alone, that ignores the cultural preconditions and the threats and dangers. And when looking at the founding of parties in European countries of the West, we can say that it is a majority of European peoples who would not want this kind of accession.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Maron. Now we have almost half an hour for discussion. We are perfectly in time limits. Just a few words and then one difficult question I would pose, which is a link to what Mrs. Maron said. The concept of renationalization became quite widespread in Europe, which the meaning of it that political classes of our countries, and not only political classes, are rather less identify themselves with the Europe as a totality, in spite of what Włodzimierz, Cimoszewicz would like to see, but rather to think more in national terms, which is the consequence of crisis, of many factors which were said by Mr. President and by other speakers. We have the problem of renationalization on several levels. The first, the nation states are trying to get back part of the power which belonged to European Union. This is the weakening of European Commission. This is a sign of it. It seems to me. So this is one dimension. The second dimension is the problem of enlargement. Enlargement was one of the greatest successes, and I don't want here to encourage you to enlarge Europe. Europe is tired. But it was great success, the greatest success in European foreign policy, actually. My country, beside other, Poland, we had smooth democratic transition, economic transition, integration into the US to a big extent because there was a European Union. There was a hope to belong to European Union. NATO actually as well. But especially European Union. It was an extremely important factor. Or to give up this extremely important arm, it touches one of the foundation of European identity, I think, of European Union. And the third dimension of this renationalization, this is the problem of attitudes towards minorities. I'm living in two countries, between France and Poland. I was shocked last year when President Sarkozy started the discussion about French identity in the country which do not have any problems with identity. It was the problem of immigrants and of Muslim population was the problem. It was obvious. So it became the problem. Now I would like to touch problem which concerns directly the country we are in, the town we are in, and fortunately we have two participants from Germany. Or there's a great poet, Yeats, who wrote in one of his poems, "The center doesn't hold." My hypothesis is that one of the problems of European Union, this is the transformation of Germany. And this is not the transformation Mrs. Thatcher or François Mitterrand were afraid of coming back to old Germany. No, Germany is just normal country. But Germany was not normal country. Till with Chancellor Kohl, Germany didn't use even the concept of national interest. Germany identified itself with the European interest, the way, of course, of realizing national interest. But it was extremely important factor of integrating of Europe, of the moment where Germany has its own national interests and quite openly speaks about it. This is one of the problems of European Union, of philosophical level, Professor Biedenkopf was speaking about, because we do not have substitute. We do not have strong European philosophy. We don't have strong European institution. Europeans would identify themselves with. So my questions concern our common problems, renationalization, and the new German question. Actually, there's all around the world a lot of articles about it. Nobody pretends that Germany is doing anything which is different from other countries. No, Germany is normal nation state now. But this is the problem for the European Union. Now, please, the floor is, yes. Professor Biedenkopf.
Thank you. Germany is actually something new. Our neighbors always had the problem during history that there in the middle of Europe was a large population that all spoke the same language. That really dominated because of their size, Europe north of the Alps. And so one of the reactions was, as we all know, Germany was always composed of many states. The idea of a united Germany was born in the 19th century, and it was a very romantic idea, not a political idea. That's very important to differentiate. Germany was never a nation state because it never identified the nation through a state. That's completely different in France, and it's completely different in Great Britain. I'm not sure whether Poland, the Polish nation, identified itself through the state, because there was also a nation when there was no Polish state. Italy has a history of very complex definitions of nation. 200 years ago, before the reunification of Italy, it was very difficult to define a nation. And so the unification process of the Germans began in the 19th century. And Prussia, of course, was a very important agent for that. But even in the Weimar Republic, we had states that made up the nation. And when Germany was divided, Brandt in 1972 said, the state is divided, the nation is not divided. And that indeed was the case, because the nation identified itself through its culture, language, and history. Now, if we have two very different concepts of nation, it is very difficult to speak about a unification of nations. I would say it's a very dangerous experiment. Let's assume France would consider organizing the French nation state in the way the Germans are organized. They would immediately have problems. Problems with the old conflicts within France, for which the power of the state was important in order to keep them together. Great Britain is the same thing. The decentralization efforts in France always stagnated and failed. In Germany, there's no problem. Now, if there are these two basic differences, we should make use of these differences. For instance, in Germany, it would be very important, and I have held this for a long time, that the regions, or as we have the states in Germany, have a function in Europe of their own, not institutionally, but in giving identity to populations. Let me close with a little example. I talked to a lady in Saxony who had a 20-year-old son, and I asked her, does he feel like a German?